A mail-order bride expected poverty. What this quiet cowboy owned shocked her. The train slowed as it reached the quiet frontier town. Dust rose in little clouds around the wooden platform, and the heat of the late afternoon sun warmed the metal tracks. A young woman stepped down carefully, gripping her small suitcase tightly. Her heart was full of excitement, but also a heavy weight of fear. She had traveled far from her home, leaving everything familiar behind. She was a mail-order bride, a girl who had promised herself a chance at a new life with a man she had never met, her mind filled with images of hardship. She had imagined a small bare cabin with creaking floors and a smoky stove. She expected poverty, simple meals, and hard labor from dawn until dusk. As she walked toward the street where the ranch was located, the quiet of the town surprised her. There were a few wooden buildings, a general store, a blacksmith shop, and a tiny schoolhouse. Children ran along the dusty road laughing while a horse-drawn wagon slowly rolled past. The town had a peaceful feel, but it was rough around the edges. She imagined this would be the life she would step into, simple, hard, and lonely. Then she saw him. The cowboy she had agreed to marry was standing by the side of the road, tall and strong, wearing a worn hat that shaded his eyes. His shirt was plain, sleeves rolled up to show sun-tanned arms, and his boots were covered in dust. He did not rush to meet her, but when he did, his gaze was calm and steady. There was something quiet about him, something serious but not unkind. He lifted his hand slightly in greeting and nodded. His voice was low but polite as he asked her name. She told him, and he repeated it carefully, as if savoring the sound. She noticed his hands, calloused but strong, and the way he stood, confident but not boastful. Her chest tightened. He was real, much more real than the letters they had exchanged. She remembered the words he had written, gentle, thoughtful, but short, always practical. He had never promised her wealth, but he had spoken of a simple life together. That simplicity had seemed modest, almost poor, and she had braced herself for it. She was not expecting much, just a place to live and a man who could care for her. She had tried to prepare herself for a life of scarcity, for meals that might be small, for rooms that might be plain and cold in the winter. The walk to the ranch was quiet at first. She followed him along a narrow dirt road that stretched out beyond the town, bordered by tall grass and wildflowers. Birds sang in the distance, and the wind carried a faint smell of earth and hay. She tried to imagine what awaited her at the end of this path. The cowboy spoke occasionally, pointing out landmarks or naming the fields and hills as they passed. His voice was calm, measured, and quiet. He did not try to charm her with words or stories. There was no exaggeration, no promise of more than reality. When the first glimpse of the ranch came into view, she stopped in her tracks. She had expected a small, crooked cabin, perhaps a tiny plot of land with a few chickens or cows. Instead, she saw wide open fields stretching toward the horizon, neatly fenced pastures filled with cattle grazing calmly. Several barns stood tall, painted with fresh red paint, and a windmill creaked softly in the distance. Horses stood in their stalls, ears twitching as they watched her approach. The house itself was not large but solid, built of sturdy wood with a porch that stretched across the front. It looked cared for, lived in, but not grand. Yet it was far more than she had imagined. Her eyes widened. She could hardly believe what she saw. This was not the poverty she had been warned to expect. The land seemed rich, full of life, and productive. The cowboy noticed her hesitation and gave a small smile. "It's not much," he said simply, "but it's enough for us. Enough." She thought about that word. Enough. She had always imagined enough as barely scraping by, a life of worry and little comfort. But standing there, looking at the fields, barns, and animals, she realized his enough was far larger than anything she had imagined. There was safety here. There was work, yes, but also the space to breathe, to grow, to learn. She followed him across the yard, her suitcase forgotten for the moment. He opened the gate to a small pen where calves played and a cow mooed softly. He pointed to the barn and explained its purpose, how the animals were fed and cared for, and the work that went into keeping the ranch running smoothly. She listened intently, her fears slowly giving way to curiosity. There was so much to see, so much she had never imagined in her simple expectations of frontier life. The house door opened, and the smell of fresh bread and cooking filled the air. She was surprised again. Simple life, yes, but not lacking in comfort. The kitchen was modest but tidy. A small stove in the corner, and shelves lined with jars of preserves and dry goods. The cowboy handed her a chair, and she took a moment to absorb the reality. The life she had feared was not empty at all. It was full of potential, full of work, full of responsibility, but also full of care. He showed her to her room, a small but comfortable space with a bed neatly made, a window looking out over the fields. Sunlight poured in, highlighting the clean wooden floor and the simple curtains. She sat on the bed, overwhelmed by the contrast between her fears and this reality. She had expected poverty, hardship, and struggle. Instead, she saw opportunity, and she felt a cautious excitement for what was to come. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange, she stepped onto the porch, looking out at the wide open land. The cowboy stood beside her, quiet, letting her take in the view. She noticed the way he cared for the land, for the animals, for the home. He was not flashy or boastful, but he had built a life with his own hands, one that offered more than she could have imagined. Her heart began to shift. Fear was still there, but it mingled with wonder and curiosity. She wanted to know more, to understand the quiet man who had created this life. She wanted to know him, not just the land he owned. And maybe, just maybe, she could be part of it, not as a passive bride expecting charity, but as a partner in the life he had built. That night, as the stars came out and the quiet town slept, she lay in her small bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch. Cows loud in the distance, the wind whispered through the trees, and the quiet cowboy moved about the house, unseen but present. She realized that the life she had feared, poverty, hardship, loneliness, was nothing like the life before her eyes. She could not yet imagine what the future would bring. But she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this was a new beginning, one she had not dared to dream. She drifted to sleep with thoughts of possibility, of work and growth, of a quiet man who had so much more than appearances suggested. Her heart, once heavy with fear, now carried a small light of anticipation. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she felt ready to meet it. The journey that had begun with letters and hopes had brought her to a reality beyond her imagination. And as the wind rustled through the grass outside, she understood something profound. Sometimes the truth is far more surprising than fear, and life can be richer than even the wildest expectations. The next morning the sun rose slowly over the wide open fields, casting a warm, golden light across the ranch. Birds sang softly from the trees, and a gentle breeze moved the tall grass in waves. The young bride woke early, her heart still racing from the surprises of the previous day. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, eager to see more of the land and learn about the life she was now a part of. The air smelled fresh and earthy, a combination of soil, grass, and the faint aroma of the barn animals. She could hear the distant lowing of cows and the soft neigh of horses in their stables. The quiet cowboy was already up, moving with calm precision. He greeted her with a simple nod and a soft, "Good morning." There was no exaggeration in his tone, no rush, only a steady rhythm that mirrored the life of the ranch. She noticed the way he moved, each step careful but confident, each gesture deliberate. There was a quiet strength in him that she had not fully appreciated yesterday, a patience that seemed to belong as much to the land as to the man himself. He began the day by showing her more of the property. She followed him along the fenced pastures, her eyes wide as they passed field after field filled with grazing cattle. The animals were healthy, their coats shining in the sunlight. She had imagined a few cows, thin and tired, but these were strong and well-fed. She could hardly believe the size of the ranch. It stretched further than she could see, dotted with barns, stables, and small sheds that held tools, feed, and supplies. The fences were sturdy, the buildings well maintained, and everything had the careful order of someone who worked with both skill and pride. He spoke little, but when he did, it was simple and informative. He explained how he rotated the pastures to keep the grass healthy, how he fed the cattle at specific times, and how he managed the horses and their training. She listened intently, trying to understand the rhythm and logic of this life. Her mind kept returning to the letters they had exchanged before she arrived. In them he had been modest, almost understated. He had never bragged about wealth or property. And yet here, in front of her eyes, was evidence of years of hard work and careful management, a life that was abundant, not in luxury but in accomplishment. As they reached a large red barn, he opened the door and invited her inside. The smell of hay and animals was strong but not unpleasant. The barn was spacious, filled with neatly stacked hay. Saddles hung on racks and tools organized carefully along the walls. Horses in their stalls watched her with curiosity, their eyes soft and intelligent. The cowboy moved among them with ease, checking hooves, brushing coats, and speaking quietly to each animal. She had never seen such a display of care and attention. It was more than work. It was respect for life itself. "This is where we keep the best horses," he said simply. "They are strong and healthy. We train them carefully, and they know the land as well as we do." She nodded, impressed, though words failed her. She had not expected such attention to detail, such pride in every corner of the ranch. The simple life she had imagined now seemed far from reality. She felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. Could she truly belong here? Could she meet the expectations of this life without faltering? The cowboy led her to another building, a smaller barn filled with supplies, grains, and tools. He opened bins and jars, showing her where everything was kept. Each item had a place, and each corner of the barn reflected careful thought. She realized that wealth here was not flashy. There were no gold coins or fancy furniture, but there was abundance in the way the land was used, in the health of the animals, and in the stability of the home. It was a different kind of richness, one built on patience, skill, and responsibility. As they walked back to the main house, the young bride began to understand the man she had married. The quiet cowboy was not poor, nor was he careless. His modest words hid a lifetime of work, planning, and quiet achievement. He had not needed to boast, because his life spoke for itself. She felt a growing respect mixed with surprise. This was a man who had taken the time to build something enduring, something that could provide safety and comfort in a harsh world. Inside the house she found a simple breakfast prepared on the stove. Fresh bread, eggs, and milk from the cow she had just seen. The smell was inviting, and for the first time, she felt a sense of comfort in her new home. She realized that the quiet cowboy had prepared for this life carefully, ensuring that everything she might need was already here. He did not speak of wealth, but she could see it in every well-placed item, every clean corner, and every organized tool. After breakfast, he invited her to help with the morning chores. She hesitated, nervous about doing something wrong, but he guided her patiently. First, they fed the chickens, scattering grains and collecting eggs. She laughed softly as the birds pecked at her hands, and he smiled quietly at her delight. Then they moved to the cattle, where he showed her how to handle the animals safely, how to check for signs of illness, and how to guide them into the pastures. She felt tired quickly, but also exhilarated. This work was harder than anything she had imagined, but it was real, honest, and purposeful. As the morning passed, she began to see more of the quiet man's world. She noticed the careful way he repaired fences, the gentle touch he used with the animals, and the way he moved with a rhythm that matched the land itself. He spoke occasionally, offering advice or pointing out details she might miss, but mostly he allowed her to observe, to learn at her own pace. She felt herself growing more confident, more capable, and more connected to the life that had seemed so foreign only hours before. By midday, she was exhausted but proud. She had learned more in a few hours than she had imagined possible. As they sat on the porch, resting and enjoying the warm sunlight, she looked out over the fields once more. The ranch stretched endlessly before her, a patchwork of green and gold under the wide sky. She could see cattle grazing, horses moving in the distance, and the small town beyond the horizon. She realized that this quiet cowboy had given her something unexpected, not only a home, but a chance to be part of a life that was strong, productive, and full of purpose. She turned to him, and for the first time truly saw him. He was simple in speech, but not in action. He did not need to show off or impress. His life was evidence of his character. She felt a surge of admiration and curiosity. How had he learned all this? How had he built this life alone? She wanted to understand him, to be part of this world, and perhaps to find her own place in it. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. She helped him mend a fence, gather firewood, and check on the horses. Each task revealed more of the quiet cowboy's skills and patience. He never raised his voice, never lost his temper, and never hurried unnecessarily. She realized that his calm nature was not laziness, as she had once feared, but a form of strength. It allowed him to manage this vast ranch efficiently, to care for the animals, and to live with purpose every day. By evening, the young bride felt a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. She had arrived expecting poverty, a small cabin, and hard, lonely work. Instead, she had found abundance, care, and a life built on skill and dedication. She realized that the quiet cowboy's true wealth was not in material possessions alone, but in the life he had created and the character he displayed every day. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and gold, they stood together on the porch. The fields stretched endlessly before them, and the animals moved quietly in their pastures. She felt a sense of awe and gratitude, a feeling she had never expected when she first stepped off the train. Her fears of poverty were replaced with curiosity and admiration. She could see the man behind the quiet demeanor, a man who had worked hard and built something lasting, something worthy of respect. That night she lay in her small bedroom, reflecting on the day. She realized that life on the ranch would be challenging, demanding, and often exhausting, but it was also rich in ways she had never imagined. She could see herself learning, growing, and becoming part of this world. The quiet cowboy had surprised her, not with grand gestures, but with the reality of his life, a life of care, responsibility, and achievement. For the first time, she felt a spark of excitement about the future. She did not yet know how she would fit into this life, but she was willing to try. She had expected poverty, but she had found possibility. She had expected simplicity, but she had found depth and strength. And most importantly, she had found a man whose quiet nature hid a life of true richness, a life she could now see, touch, and become part of. The moon rose over the ranch, casting silver light on the fields and buildings. She drifted to sleep with thoughts of learning, working, and discovering this new world. Her heart, once heavy with fear, now carried anticipation and hope. The quiet cowboy had shown her that life could be more than she imagined, that work could be fulfilling, and that love might grow from respect, trust, and shared effort. She dreamed of the next day, eager to explore, to learn, and to continue discovering the truth behind the quiet man she had married. The ranch was alive with possibility, and for the first time she felt she could belong in this new, unexpected world. The following morning, the young bride awoke to the sound of birds singing outside her window. The sun was already spilling golden light across the fields, and the smell of fresh earth and hay drifted in through the open window. She stretched and took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill her lungs. Today would be another day of learning, another day of discovering the ranch, and another day of seeing the quiet cowboy in action. She felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement, unsure of how well she would manage the work, but eager to try. She dressed quickly in simple clothes, sturdy enough for the tasks ahead. The cowboy was already outside, checking the fences along the edge of the pasture. His hat shaded his face, and he moved with a steady rhythm that matched the quiet heartbeat of the ranch. He looked up as she stepped out and gave her a small nod. "Good morning," he said softly. His voice was calm and even, a steadying presence in the vastness of the land. After a brief breakfast of eggs, fresh bread, and milk, he suggested she help with the morning chores. She hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. She wanted to show that she could participate, that she could belong in this life. Their first task was feeding the livestock. She watched carefully as he measured grains and scattered them in the troughs. He guided her hand gently when she fed the chickens, correcting her only when necessary, and always with patience. The animals clucked, packed, and moved around them, and she laughed softly at their curiosity. Next, they moved to the cattle. The cowboy demonstrated how to guide the animals through the gate into the pasture, his voice low and steady. "Keep calm," he said. "They can feel your tension." She followed his instructions, feeling nervous as the cows moved past her, their large bodies brushing close. At first she stumbled and almost dropped the feed bucket, but he caught it just in time, steadying her hand. "There," he said simply, "you're learning." She smiled, feeling a small surge of pride. She had feared she would fail, but with his quiet guidance she realized she could handle more than she had imagined. As the morning passed, the young bride began to adjust to the rhythm of ranch life. She learned how to lift hay bales without straining her back, how to sweep the barn efficiently, and how to move quietly so as not to startle the animals. The work was exhausting, but it was honest and purposeful. Each task gave her a sense of accomplishment. The quiet cowboy watched her carefully, offering guidance only when necessary, letting her learn through experience. She noticed the patience in his eyes and the subtle encouragement in his gestures. There was no rush, no harsh words, only steady support. During a short break under the shade of a large oak tree, she sat on a wooden fence, wiping sweat from her brow. The cowboy joined her silently, standing nearby and watching the fields. She stole a glance at him, noticing how his hands were strong and weathered, evidence of years of hard work. There was a quiet dignity in the way he moved, a calm strength that made her feel both safe and intrigued. She had expected him to be simple, perhaps even plain, but she now realized there was depth to him she had not yet understood. "Do you like it here?" he asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. His tone was neutral, not prying, but she felt it held genuine curiosity. She hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's more than I expected," she admitted. "I thought life here would be smaller, poorer, harder, in a different way." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It is hard work," he said, "but it's honest. You see results. You care for something, and it grows. That's the reward." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that she felt deep in her chest. She began to understand that his quietness was not emptiness, but thoughtfulness. His life was not filled with empty noise. It was full of meaning, effort, and responsibility. The afternoon brought new lessons. She helped him mend a broken fence post, learning how to hammer nails straight and hold the wood steady. She tripped a few times, dropped the hammer once, and became frustrated, but he remained calm. "Mistakes happen," he said.
"You'll get it. Take your time."
She realized that this was more than teaching. It was patience and trust. He trusted her to learn, and that trust made her want to rise to the challenge. As they worked, she began to notice small things about him. The way he hummed quietly while hammering, the careful attention he paid to every detail, and the little gestures that showed he thought ahead, preparing tools, stacking hay neatly, checking on the animals at regular intervals. She understood that the quiet cowboy had built his life carefully, methodically, and with care for every living thing on the ranch. It was no wonder the property thrived. By evening they were both tired but satisfied. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the fields. They sat on the porch together, sharing a simple meal and looking out over the land. The young bride felt a growing admiration for this man. He had not only created a life of abundance, but had done so with integrity and patience. She realized that wealth here was measured differently, not by money, but by care, hard work, and dedication. In the following days, the young bride continued to adjust. She learned how to ride the horses, how to feed and groom them, and how to work alongside the cowboy without fear. Each day brought new challenges and new successes. She fell occasionally, got bruised hands from chores, and felt fatigue she had never known. But each small victory made her more confident. She began to feel she could belong here, not as a visitor, but as part of a life that was steady, honest, and fulfilling. Their bond grew quietly, subtly, without grand gestures or declarations. He would offer a hand when she stumbled, a word of encouragement when she struggled, and sometimes a quiet smile that made her heart flutter. She began to understand the value of his calmness. It was not distance, but depth. He was strong, capable, and trustworthy. She found herself thinking of him more, wondering what he thought of her efforts and if he noticed her small achievements. The ranch itself became a teacher. She learned to read the land, which areas needed water, which crops were thriving, and how the weather affected the animals. She began to understand the rhythm of the days, the quiet patterns of life that she had never known, and through it all the quiet cowboy remained beside her, guiding, correcting, and silently observing. She felt a mix of gratitude, respect, and curiosity that grew stronger with each passing day. One late afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in, dark clouds covering the sky and the wind whipping through the fields. The young bride panicked for a moment, worried about the animals and the fences. The cowboy grabbed her hand gently, guiding her back to the barn. "Stay calm," he said. "We can handle this together." She followed him, her fear easing with his presence. Inside the barn, they secured the animals and covered supplies. She watched him work efficiently, calmly, and with confidence. It amazed her how he seemed to know exactly what needed to be done and when. After the storm passed, they stepped outside to see the land glistening with fresh rain. The fields looked alive, the grass greener than ever, and the animals were safe and calm. The young bride felt a rush of relief and awe. She realized that life on the ranch would have its challenges, but with patience, skill, and teamwork, they could overcome anything. She looked at the quiet cowboy beside her and understood that this was a man who had earned respect through action, not words. As night fell, they returned to the house, tired but content. She prepared a small dinner while he tended to last-minute chores. Sitting together afterward, she felt a warmth that had little to do with the fire in the stove. It was the warmth of connection, of mutual respect, and of shared effort. She thought of the letters they had exchanged before her arrival, and how much reality had exceeded expectation, not in luxury, but in substance. She reflected on her own growth. She was no longer afraid of the work, no longer intimidated by the animals, and no longer unsure of her place. She had begun to belong, not because she had been given anything, but because she had earned it alongside him. And in the quiet moments when they sat on the porch under the stars, she felt admiration turning into something more, a subtle awareness of affection that she had not expected. By the end of the week, the young bride had adjusted to much of the routine. She could feed the animals, handle the horses, and help with chores with confidence. She understood the layout of the land, the needs of the livestock, and the rhythm of life. Most importantly, she had begun to see the quiet cowboy not only as her husband, but as a man of integrity, strength, and patience, a man worthy of respect and perhaps of love. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the wind rustling through the trees, and the occasional neigh of a horse, she felt a deep sense of calm. The life she had feared, the poverty she had imagined, was not real. She had discovered abundance, not in gold or luxury, but in work, purpose, and character. She felt her heart opening slowly to the man who had created this life and to the life itself that now belonged to her. She realized that the quiet cowboy had more than she had ever expected. He had patience, wisdom, and strength. He had a life built on care, responsibility, and steady effort. And she, a young bride who had arrived with fear and modest expectations, was beginning to see a future filled with possibility, learning, and even companionship. For the first time, she felt a quiet hope. She did not yet know all that the future held, but she understood that she had entered a world that would challenge her, teach her, and perhaps reward her in ways she had never imagined. She had begun to bond with the quiet cowboy, And through that bond, she was discovering not only the life of the ranch, but the life she could build alongside him. The next week brought new challenges to the young bride's life on the ranch. She had grown accustomed to the daily routines, feeding the animals, helping with chores, and learning the rhythms of the land. But now she would face the reality that life in the frontier was never easy. It was one thing to follow instructions when all went smoothly, and another entirely to handle the unexpected. She woke early one morning to a sky heavy with gray clouds, the wind moving the tall grass in restless waves. The air smelled of rain, and she could hear distant rumbles of thunder. The cowboy was already outside, checking the fences near the far pasture. His hat was low, and his hands moved with precise efficiency. He noticed her approaching and gave a simple nod. "Storm coming," he said. His voice carried calm certainty. "We'll need to secure the animals and check the barns. Things can get messy if we wait too long." Her heart raced with worry. She had faced work before, but she had not yet experienced the pressure of protecting a whole ranch during a storm. She followed him quickly, trying to keep up. As they moved, he explained what needed to be done. The horses had to be safely in their stalls, the cows in the nearest pasture, and the fences reinforced to prevent damage. She listened carefully, trying to remember every instruction. The sense of urgency made her nervous, but his calm presence reassured her. The first task was the horses. She had grown fond of them in the past days and worried for their safety. The cowboy showed her how to guide them gently but firmly, speaking softly to keep them calm. She followed his example, her hands trembling slightly as she held the lead rope. The horses reacted to her uncertainty at first, moving nervously, but he stayed close, guiding her and offering quiet encouragement. "Steady," he said. "They can feel your fear. Keep calm, and they will follow." Slowly, she found her own confidence, and together they led the animals safely into the stalls. Next came the cows. The rain had begun to fall lightly, and the wind grew stronger. The cattle lowed anxiously, sensing the coming storm. She helped the cowboy move them toward the secure pasture, her arms aching from holding the feed and guiding the animals. At one point, a young calf broke away and ran toward the fence. She panicked and called out, but the cowboy moved swiftly, grabbing the calf and calming it with gentle words. She realized that he had an instinct for this work, a way of handling situations that came from experience, patience, and respect for the animals. She watched him closely, learning not just tasks, but the quiet strength that came from knowing the land and its creatures. By midday, the storm had grown stronger. Rain pelted the roof of the barns, and the wind whipped through the trees. The young bride was soaked, tired, and anxious. She had expected hard work, but not this intensity. She struggled to lift a hay bale, her hands slippery with water and her back aching. The cowboy came over and steadied it, showing her the proper technique. "We have to work together," he said. "This is not about speed, but about care and patience." She nodded, realizing that she could not face this alone. The trust she had begun to feel for him deepened. He was not only guiding her through the work, but protecting her from mistakes and danger, teaching her to be strong without being reckless. In the afternoon, they took a brief rest in the barn, sitting together on the edge of a haystack. She shivered from cold and fatigue, and he offered her a warm cloth and a piece of bread. He was grateful for his quiet kindness. "You're doing well," he said simply. "Most people would give up in this weather." She felt a small warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and gratitude. It was not just the work that mattered, but the way he encouraged her without making her feel inadequate. She began to understand the subtle ways he expressed trust and respect. After the storm passed, they went out to inspect the property. Some fences had fallen, and a few branches had broken, but the animals were safe. She realized that challenges would always come, but with patience, skill, and teamwork, they could handle anything. She admired the cowboy's ability to remain calm and decisive, even under pressure. It made her feel safe, but also inspired her to improve herself. She wanted to be a partner in this life, not a passive observer. In the days that followed, the young bride continued to learn. She discovered that ranch life required more than physical strength. It required observation, patience, and problem-solving. She learned how to notice changes in the animal's behavior, how to repair small damages before they became major problems, and how to anticipate the needs of the land. Each task challenged her, but she felt a growing sense of competence and independence. The cowboy allowed her to make mistakes, correcting her gently, never scolding or mocking. This patience built a quiet bond of trust between them. One evening, after a long day, they sat on the porch together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. She watched him carefully, noticing the lines on his face, the steady rhythm of his breathing, and the quiet focus in his eyes. She realized that she admired him not only for the life he had built, but for the way he carried himself, responsibly, patiently, and without arrogance. There was strength in his quiet demeanor, and she felt drawn to it in a way she could not yet explain. Challenges continued to test her. A sick calf required careful attention, and she spent hours learning to treat it under the cowboy's guidance. She learned how to recognize signs of illness, how to clean wounds, and how to comfort the animal. Her hands were sore and her clothes were stained, but she felt a deep satisfaction in helping. The cowboy watched her closely, offering advice and encouragement. She realized that trust was not just about him believing in her, but about her learning to trust herself and her abilities. Through these experiences, their bond grew. She noticed small gestures. He would place a hand on her shoulder when she hesitated, offer her water when she was tired, or smile quietly when she succeeded at a difficult task. These moments, simple but meaningful, made her feel seen and valued. She realized that trust was forming between them, slowly and naturally, built on shared effort and mutual respect. She began to rely on him not only for guidance but for emotional support in this challenging new life. One afternoon, a problem with the water supply tested them further. The pump had stopped working, and the livestock needed water. Panic began to rise in her chest, but the cowboy remained calm. He explained the problem, showed her how to fix part of the pump, and guided her step by step. Working together, they restored the flow of water. She felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced before. She had contributed to solving a real problem, under pressure, with guidance from a man she was beginning to trust deeply. Even in small moments, the cowboy's character shone. He treated the ranch hands with respect, shared credit for accomplishments, and always remained calm during setbacks. She observed him quietly, learning not just about work, but about the kind of person he was. The quiet strength, patience, and integrity she had seen in him were not performances. They were part of who he was. She felt a deep admiration growing inside her, accompanied by a soft, unspoken affection. By the end of Part 4's week, the young bride felt a shift within herself. She was no longer the timid girl who had arrived, unsure and anxious about what awaited her. She had faced storms, challenges, and difficult tasks, and she had survived. She had learned to trust the quiet cowboy, not blindly, but with understanding and respect. She had begun to see the depth of his character, the wisdom in his patience, and the strength behind his calm exterior. At night, as they sat on the porch together, the sky filled with stars, she reflected on the days gone by. Life on the ranch was demanding, yes, but it was honest and meaningful. She realized that the quiet cowboy's true wealth was not just in his land, his animals, or his possessions, but in his character, his knowledge, and his integrity. She felt grateful to be part of this world, and she began to imagine a future built not on fear or expectation, but on trust, partnership, and shared effort. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of belonging. She had faced challenges, learned, and grown stronger. She had begun to understand the rhythm of ranch life, and she had started to bond with the quiet cowboy in a way that went beyond work. Respect and trust had become the foundation of their relationship, and something gentle, tender, and unspoken began to grow between them. She realized that life would continue to test them, but together they could face anything. And in that realization she felt a quiet joy, a sense of peace, and the beginning of something more than she had ever imagined. The sun rose slowly over the ranch, spilling soft golden light across the fields. The young bride stirred from sleep, feeling a sense of calm she had never known before arriving at this place. For weeks, she had worked, learned, struggled, and adapted to the rhythm of ranch life. She had faced storms, cared for animals, repaired fences, and learned the many small tasks that kept the land alive. Each day had tested her patience, strength, and determination. Yet now she felt a quiet confidence. She belonged here, not by chance, but through effort, learning and growing alongside the quiet cowboy she had married. The day began with the usual morning chores. She helped gather the animals, fed the chickens and horses, and checked the fences. The tasks felt familiar now, less intimidating than before. She moved with a steady rhythm, her hands confident, her steps sure. The cowboy watched her, silently approving, though he said little. His calm presence had become a steady anchor in her life, and she found herself looking forward to the moments they shared in quiet work. The simplicity of these mornings, the connection with the land and the animals, and the rhythm of shared labor had begun to feel like home. After breakfast, they walked together across the pastures. The fields stretched endlessly before them, green and full, dotted with grazing cattle. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying the earthy smell of soil and hay. The young bride paused to watch the sun catch the edges of the clouds, painting them gold and orange. She felt a wave of gratitude for this place, this life, and the man who had built it. She remembered how she had imagined poverty, a tiny cabin, and hardship when she first arrived. The reality had been far different. She realized that wealth was not measured in material things alone, but in the care, effort, and life one created. The cowboy broke the silence with a soft question. "Do you feel at home yet?" He did not demand an answer, only asked gently, curious to know her feelings. She smiled, looking at the land, the barns, and the animals. "I do," she admitted. "I never expected it to be like this. I thought life here would be hard and lonely. But it's more than I imagined. It feels alive. It feels ours." He nodded, accepting her words without comment, but she could see approval in his eyes. It was not praise he sought to give, but understanding and connection. The day passed in a quiet, fulfilling rhythm. They worked side by side, repairing fences, checking the animals, and preparing the fields for the next season. She marveled at the depth of his knowledge, the care he took in every detail, and the steady, calm way he faced each task. He never rushed, never became frustrated, and always maintained a careful balance between patience and efficiency. She felt herself learning not only the practical skills of ranch life but also the quiet wisdom that came from experience, responsibility, and respect for everything under his care. During a brief rest under the shade of a large oak tree, she spoke of her life before the ranch, the letters she had sent, the hopes and fears she carried, and the life she had imagined. He listened quietly, never interrupting, his eyes steady on hers. She realized how rare it was to be heard in this way, to be understood without judgment or impatience. In that moment she felt the depth of the trust forming between them, a bond built not only on shared work but on respect and understanding. Later, they moved to the barns to check on the animals. She had grown to love the routine, the responsibilities, and the gentle challenges of caring for living creatures. As she worked, she felt capable, confident, and part of something larger than herself. The quiet cowboy moved beside her, offering guidance only when needed, letting her grow, stumble, and succeed. She realized that this partnership was not one-sided. He had shared knowledge, patience, and trust, and she had contributed her effort, care, and willingness to learn. Together, they had built something steady, meaningful, and real. By late afternoon, they stood on the porch of the house, looking out over the wide fields bathed in golden light. The ranch was alive with movement, the cattle grazing, the horses resting, and the wind moving through the grass in soft waves. The young bride felt a profound sense of awe. She thought back to the moment she had stepped off the train, full of fear and expectation, imagining poverty and hardship. Now, standing here, she understood that life had surprised her in the most extraordinary way. What she had expected as poverty had become abundance, not in wealth alone, but in purpose, love, and opportunity. She looked at the quiet cowboy beside her, and for the first time she saw the full measure of him. He was more than a man of land and animals. He was a man of integrity, patience, and careful strength. The way he had guided her, taught her, and trusted her had revealed a depth of character she had not anticipated. She felt a quiet admiration, growing into something tender, a connection born not of words or promises, but of shared effort and understanding. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they prepared a simple dinner together. She had learned to cook meals suited to ranch life, fresh bread, eggs, and vegetables from the small garden. They ate quietly, side by side, occasionally exchanging soft smiles. The simplicity of the moment felt rich, full of comfort, connection, and peace. She realized that this life was not about extravagance or luxury, but about substance, care, and partnership. After dinner, they stepped outside again. The sky was painted with stars, and the moon reflected softly on the fields. The animals had settled for the night, and the ranch was calm. She felt the weight of the day lift from her shoulders, replaced by a deep sense of contentment. She turned to him, noticing the quiet satisfaction in his posture, the same calm confidence that had guided them through storms and challenges alike. She realized that she trusted him fully, not blindly, but with understanding and respect. "Thank you," she said softly, surprising herself with the words. He looked at her, raising an eyebrow slightly. "For what?" he asked, genuinely curious. "For everything," she replied. "For teaching me, for trusting me, for showing me this life, for showing me a home I never expected." He nodded, accepting her words with quiet dignity, and she felt warmth in her chest. She understood that gratitude was not just about things received, but about the care, patience, and integrity someone shared freely. The days turned into weeks, and the young bride fully embraced her new life. She continued to work alongside the quiet cowboy, learning, growing, and finding joy in the steady rhythm of ranch life. The animals, fields, and shores became familiar companions. She took pride in her abilities, in her contribution to the ranch, and in the partnership they had formed. The quiet bond between them deepened, a connection built on trust, respect, and shared effort. One afternoon, as they walked along the pasture together, she paused to take in the beauty around her. The land stretched endlessly, green and golden in the late summer sun. The animals moved calmly, the barn stood strong, and the house reflected the care and effort invested in it. She realized that what she had expected as poverty had been transformed into abundance, a life full of responsibility, love, and opportunity. She felt admiration for the quiet cowboy, but also a deep sense of belonging. She was not merely a bride. She was part of this life, a partner in the work, care, and future of the ranch. That evening, they stood on the porch together, watching the sun set behind the hills. The colors of the sky, pink, orange, and gold, reflected in her heart. She thought of the journey she had taken from fear to understanding, from expectation to awe. She realized that life on the ranch had given her more than she had imagined, a home, a purpose, a connection, and a man whose character and quiet strength had inspired her in ways she could not have predicted. As the stars appeared, she felt a profound sense of peace. The quiet cowboy stood beside her, steady and strong, and she understood the gift he had given her. Not only the land and animals, but the chance to belong, to learn, to grow, and to be valued. She reflected on the past weeks, on the storms, the work, the learning, and the moments of shared laughter and quiet understanding. Each experience had strengthened her, and each moment had revealed the true wealth of this life: trust, care, respect, and partnership. She turned to him one last time that night, and saw the man who had quietly built a life worth admiring. She realized that she had grown to trust him completely, respect him deeply, and perhaps, in her own way, love him too. Her expectations of poverty and hardship had been replaced with gratitude, admiration, and acceptance. She understood now that a home was not just a house, and wealth was not just money. It was care, patience, effort, and a life shared with someone steady, reliable, and kind. With that understanding, she stepped inside the house, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never known. She had arrived expecting hardship, but she had found abundance. She had arrived fearful, but she had discovered trust. She had arrived uncertain, but she had found a home and a partner in life. The quiet cowboy had shown her that sometimes reality exceeds expectation in ways that are profound, lasting, and quietly beautiful. And as she lay in bed that night listening to the gentle sounds of the ranch, the animals resting, the wind moving softly through the trees, and the faint creak of the house settling, she felt a deep sense of contentment. She belonged here, fully and completely. She had found not only a home, but a life rich in purpose, care, and connection. Her heart, once full of fear and expectation, now held gratitude, admiration, and hope for the days to come. The moon shone over the ranch, casting silver light on the fields and buildings. She drifted into sleep with a heart lightened, a mind at peace, and a spirit ready for the future. The life she had expected to be simple and poor had become something extraordinary, filled with work, partnership, love, and quiet wonder. She had discovered that true richness lay not in what one owned, but in what one built, shared, and cherished.